and that's buttery. That is sensational. That is soft. In this video, we've got 2 new irons to take a look at for 2026 from Mizuno. M13, M15, these are going to go into that players category section, but with a little bit of a twist, which we're going to run through in this particular video. I'm going to hit them, I'm going to give you some TrackMan numbers, as well as my personal feedback of the feel, the looks, and the performance of these 2 new irons. So let's just delve into how they're structured now into this players category from Mizuno. Now we do have the JPX lineup. That is typically referred to as our fast ball speeds, loads of technology, more forgiveness in that sort of area. And then we typically had the Mizuno Pro lineup, which was more of the players category, little bit of tech venturing into that, but more in that players area. Now, they've sort of split this players area up into 2 little mini sections in a way. We've seen the introduction of the S1, S3, which is the signature 1 and 3, very much the heritage of Mizuno, that grain flow forge and the ultimate players irons. And now we've got this M13 and M15, which is the modern series, is what the M is standing for. So blending some tech into that player's head with the grain flow forging. This is what it's all about in these 2 new irons. So we'll start off with the M15. So this, as I mentioned, is the 245 replacement iron, essentially. We've got a hollow body construction, but it's a progressive set. In the longer irons being a bigger sort of hollow section with some tungsten, very deep in there for that sort of higher launch. In the lower lofted irons, a little bit obviously forgiveness and help in that area. But then moving into the sort of mid irons where we still see tungsten a little bit less, slightly different position for that mid flight. And then we move into the shorter irons, which is more of a one-piece element with a tiny bit of hollow construction, but no tungsten for those scoring irons. So let's have a little look at it in that playing position. This is, for me, always an important part, you know, and we know Mizuno irons always look really good, don't they? And this, again, is no exception. It's a medium-ish top line. We've got a little bit of chamfer on that top section, but also we've got a medium top line. So we know there's a little bit of thickness there, but when I put that down, there's a tiny bit of offset, but the blade length from heel to toe isn't too long, in my opinion. So it's still a nice squat look, but we can just tell we've got that slightly thicker top edge than maybe what we would see in the M13 irons, and obviously a little bit different to what we see in the S1, S3. That's a good solid hit. I'll tell you what, that sounds fantastic. Hollow construction. Instantly, I would say that doesn't sound as loud as what we saw in the 245, which again was the hollow construction. So this is a 7 iron I'm hitting, which as standard comes in at 29 degrees of loft. We know we're going to see that slightly stronger loft in this area. So when we look at the S1, S3 players category, this modern M13, M15, this M15 is going to be the most forgiving, easiest to use, but trying to blend in that feel, the sound and the performance that we see in that players category, but this is ultimately going to be the most forgiving in that area. And that does sound very good. They've done a lot of work on the sound of the golf club, how they break the sound waves up to give it that more muter, forged-like feel. It's a little bit off the toe, that wasn't perfect. TrackMan showed that off the middle. It felt a bit toey to me, to be honest. Okay, 179. So we know maybe we're going to see the spin numbers be a little bit on that lower side, typically with that loft area. So that felt probably the nicest of strikes there, to be honest. Really nice sort of ball flight. Good numbers. I think the sound of that is pretty good to me. It sounds very solid. I think if you blindfolded me and gave me that, would I say that was a hollow construction iron? I don't think I would, to be honest, because that sounds really nice for a hollow iron. Now, when we look at the back of the golf club, it's pretty sleek here, isn't it? Very nice, clean back, just the M15 logo towards the heel section. We turn it onto the sole. We see a sort of nice width of sole without it being too thin, with a little bit of that sort of more chamfered leading edge, a bit more of a beveled leading edge there, as well as a little bit of trail relief on that back edge there, helping to get that club in and out of that turf nice and quick. So as we mentioned, in those longer irons from the 4 iron through to the 7 iron, we've got a bit more of a hollow construction with some tungsten weight, 51 grams of weight thrown very sort of deep in the head. Obviously, the lower they get that tungsten, a little bit help on that launch in those lower lofted irons. And then we move into the 8 iron, which is different to all the other irons. So as the loft comes up a little bit more in that 8 iron, the tungsten now disappears. We've still got the obviously the hollow construction in there, but we lose the tungsten where we don't need as much help to get that ball sort of launched. We've still got the grain flow forged chromoly sort of face and sort of neck section there with the stainless steel back section. And then as you move into the scoring irons, so the 9 iron pitching wedge and gap wedge then becomes a partial hollow construction, so only a tiny bit of hollowness in that head. It then moves into the grain flow forge HD 1025E soft sort of metal there with that's still that stainless steel back section. So all these irons are very progressive on through the lofts, trying to work in what you're trying to get out of these irons. Great feel, great sound to that. Really impressed with the feel off that club face. A little bit pulled from me on that particular shot, just fractionally, not a lot. Now Mizuno have done a lot of work with the sound, so harmonic impact technology is what we call it. We've seen that before with Mizuno, but they have actually adapted that a little bit more with the M15 iron against the previous 245. Yes, that's not perfect on the strike. The flight's great. Ball speed's still pretty good and still hitting around that 180 carry mark. Really like that iron. It looks fantastic. I like the setup appearance. It's not too big on that blade length, keeping that compactness, but you have got that forgiveness under that bonnet in this club head. Okay, so M13. Let's have a little look at this one against the M15. Let's just compare the two in terms of visuals in that playing position. Now, obviously, as we're going to expect, we instantly see a thinner top line, a little bit more of a chamfer on that top edge, a little bit thinner. It's a lot neater. We also see a little bit more of a more compact head, fractionally shorter again, heel and toe. So ultimately, this is just in a little bit more of a compact package than what we see in that M15. Now, as we move the club over, this is ultimately going to be a replacement for the 243 iron, but again, with some differences in the technology. And I think this is where this iron gets really quite exciting. You know, you're getting closer to the S series, that ultimate player's iron, but we're also trying to mix in some help, some ball speed, some forgiveness. And I think this is where, for me, I'm going to predict this M13 is probably going to be the most popular iron, I would probably say, in that players category. You know, S1, S3, M13, M15. I think this one is going to tick the box for a lot of golfers. You can blend that forgiveness with that looks and playability and that feel. This is going to be a real winner. Back of the golf club looks great. Again, you know, very clean. We obviously got a little bit more of a badge in there now, which is holding that or hiding that cavity a little bit more. Ultimately, in that playing position, that is a great looking iron. Little bit of offset still there. Medium top line, a little bit more squat. It very much looks a bladey sort of golf club. So if you really like that player's iron, the S3 iron, this will probably suit your eye as well, but we've got a little bit more tech in there. So this is a 7 iron again. Now the lofts are changing from the M15s, as you're going to expect. So the M13 now, 7 iron is 32 degrees. So we should see a little bit difference of spin number. Oh, and that is sensational. That feels unbelievable. The sound on that, the feel off the club face, the flight was really nice. That is much softer than what we've just seen, or a softer feel and not quite as explosive what we see with the M15, naturally because of the loft as well, to be honest. That's beautiful. Looks fantastic behind the golf ball. Really like the shape of that. A little bit of chrome heel and toe, satin groove area again. It's that nickel satin finish. Right, that was not a great strike. It's leaked a little bit to the right on me. There's that heel contact. I'm going to drop a bit of ball speed, and I've dropped about 10 yards of distance there. That wasn't a great strike. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, again, we've got this progressive move through the set. So the 4 and 5 iron have got a little bit of a cavity in the back here, as you're going to expect. Now, there's no tungsten thrown in here like we see with the M15, but we've got that grain flow forged chromoly. Again, the face, the top line, and the neck is all grain flow forged. with that stainless steel back section again. Now the 4 and 5 iron have that integration of the contoured eclipse is what they call it, which is basically a little bit more room in the bottom of that cavity there, which allows that face just to flex a little bit more on that low on the face strike in those longer irons. It's just going to help you to get that ball launch but keep that ball speed up. Then we move into the 6, 7 and 8 iron. And obviously this is a 7 iron that I've got. Now we've got a micro slot in the behind that hitting area there, so not quite as much as we see in those longer irons, but when we get into these irons we maybe don't need that help as much. Again, we've got more of a full body grain flow chromoly, again face, top line and neck section with that stainless steel back. And then we move into the scoring irons, so the 9, the wedge and the gap wedge now becomes one solid whole piece of grain flow forged 1025E steel now, which obviously going to give us that ultimate sort of feel and scoring in those shorter irons. Oh, that feels fantastic. So this Eclipse technology, what we see in those long irons, that 4 and 5 iron, is basically, it's a 35% improvement in terms of thickness against the 243 model, the previous model, which is quite a staggering amount of change there in a way. So they're trying to see, or Mizuno are saying, there's more ball speed with this M13 in comparison to the 243 iron. Beautiful. What a gorgeous ball flight. Fantastic sound, feel. Flight's gorgeous. Numbers are pretty good there as well. So for me, they're two really good irons. I'm so impressed with that M15, with the sound and the feel for that ultimate hollow construction iron. So I think it's been great improvements there from the previous 245 model. The M13 looks incredible in that playing position for my opinion. The feel is fantastic yet again, and the numbers are pretty good also. So I think it's real two great additions, and I quite like how they've just split that players category, S1, S3, ultimate players irons, those really in my opinion. And then this M13, M15 is again great looks, some great feel and sound, but added technology, help, forgiveness, ball speed in there. A beautiful mix in my opinion. Post comments down below, let me know your thoughts. The Mizuno lineup, that's really strong for 2026. Stay tuned, plenty more review videos coming your way. Hopefully catch you all very soon.